Welcome everybody to the Wilmette Institute's third web talk of its series out of 12. This is to celebrate our 20th anniversary. The National Spiritual Assembly appointed the board of the Wilmette Institute in January of 1995, and so we are now celebrating that event all this year with these free web talks. So this is the third one, as I said, and today we're going to hear from Ann Perry, who will be giving us a talk on where spirit meets art. The Wilmette Institute has been involved with teaching classes for quite a long time, and Ann has been faculty for us much of that time too. For 10 years, we had a Spiritual Foundations for the Global Civilization program, which was a face-to-face program that we ran in Wilmette every summer. People came there for up to 4 weeks and then went home and did online classes afterwards. And that prompted us to start doing online classes for anybody in 1998. As of last night, when I did the count, we had 298 courses from 1998 to the present and 8,298 learners. I think we've had 2 more people sign up since then, so we're probably right at the 8,300 mark at the moment. And these various learners that we've had come from 100 countries, and the number of presentations that they've been able to do as a result of taking our classes is really impossible to count. Not only to study circles, not only deepenings, feasts, but they've given presentations in all kinds of different situations, obviously many to just friends of theirs. And we really don't know how many people have become Baha'is as a result of our classes, indirectly from learning something from someone who took one of our classes, but we do know it's well over 100. This particular year, our 20th year, we've inaugurated these web talks. We're also going to start webinars in May, and we have web publications as well. We have a website now where we're publishing things, and we're working on trying to arrange ways people can get credit through colleges for taking some of our courses. And there's some slow progress on that, I'm glad to say, but it's going to take some time, I'm afraid, before that really works out. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Ann Perry. I hesitate to say how long I've known Ann because that would reveal our ages, but it's been a while. She has a PhD in aesthetics from a institution right there in Dallas, Texas, where she currently lives. She teaches at the Dallas Institute of the Arts, and I'm sure is a very popular teacher there as well. She's published quite a few things. Many of you may have seen Greenacre on the Piscataqua, A History of the Greenacre Baha'i School. She was the chief author and the editor of that book, and there was a committee of 6 or 7 of us working on that book, and it was really quite an interesting process that she coordinated and shepherded. And now, of course, there's been a 3rd edition. That book has been updated several times. She also published an article, Women in Art, in the Journal of Baha'i Studies. Various other articles and such have been published in various places. She edits Horizon, which is an arts journal, and she and her husband Tim together put together the Luminous Journey, Abdu'l-Baha in America. Many of you may have seen that particular lengthy documentary film about Abdu'l-Baha's visit to the United States and Canada in 1912. Quite a remarkable piece of work. She's been faculty for Wilmette Institute quite a long time, and today, of course, she's going to be speaking about where spirit intersects art. Afterwards, we will have the video of this particular presentation up on our YouTube channel, and we're going to probably be able to get a podcast put up in a few days as well. So with that introduction to Ann, without further ado, if Boyd can switch us over so that Ann is now controlling the screen.
I'm delighted to be with you today and be part of the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Wilmette Institute, whom I would like to thank for inviting me to address you on my favorite topic and the subject of my dissertation, the intersection of art and religion. The first part of my talk will be more theoretical and the second more practical, and I hope you get something from each section. Art and religion have had a dynamic and intertwined relationship for many years, providing a fascinating field of study for those interested in either artistic dimensions of religion or religious dimensions of art. Remaining distinct categories despite some remarkable overlappings, art and religion have influenced and enhanced each other, as well as provided arenas for conflict. Central to my own interest in this discourse is the concept of progressive revelation, a core principle in Baha'i theology. The Baha'i writings affirm that religion in its essence is vital, progressive, and renewed cyclically. Hence, prophets or manifestations of God appear in various places at various times to renew religion and engender developments in the arts and sciences. Baha'u'llah, the most recent of these manifestations, has affirmed the lofty goals of the essential oneness of all religions, the unity of humanity, and the equality of women and men, but also has much to say about art, and the body of Baha'i sacred writings articulate far more on this subject than the scriptures of earlier religions. The Baha'i writings state, all art is a gift of the Holy Spirit. When this light shines through the mind of a musician, it manifests itself in beautiful harmonies. Again, shining through the mind of a poet, it is seen in fine poetry and poetic prose. When the light of the Sun of Truth inspires the mind of a painter, he produces marvelous pictures. These gifts are fulfilling their highest purpose when showing forth the praise of God. Of course, nothing that human creativity can produce can compare what God or her prophets can do. And perhaps it is saintly deeds that matter more than art in an ultimate sense. Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, said to an artist, "Can you paint upon the page of the world the ideal pictures of the Supreme Concourse? The pictures which are in the ideal world are eternal. I wish you to become such an artist. Man can paint those ideal pictures upon the tablet of existence with the brush of deeds. The holy divine manifestations are all heavenly artists. Upon the canvas of creation, with the paint of their deeds and lives and actions, they paint immortal pictures which cannot be found in any art museum of Europe or America, but you find the masterpieces of these spiritual artists in the hearts." And yet we have various statements by artists and others concerning the spiritual obligation of those with creative gifts. Composer Robert Schumann said, "To send light into the darkness of men's hearts, such is the duty of the artist." So now I'm going to show various images as I speak. It is interesting to see that in various phases of development over time, a particular religion will have a changing relationship to art. Religion has been and can be the means, inspiration, reason, or occasion for the production of art. Conversely, art can embellish, intensify, teach, record, distort, caricature, or otherwise serve, reflect, parody, or influence religion. Art is sometimes seen as transgressive to people of faith. Some religions have prohibitions that curtail certain forms or expressions of art. And proponents of religion have at times suppressed, destroyed, criticized, or forbidden art or art making. You may remember the tragic destruction of Buddhist sculptures by the Taliban back in the 90s, and certainly the more recent controversy and deaths over cartoons published in newspapers depicting Muhammad. 2 days ago, there was a tragic news report about ISIL destroying cultural relics in Iraq. It serves us to understand the various perspectives behind such controversies. Conversely, spiritual or religious practice can inspire the production of art. Art can develop under the aegis or influence of religion, and certainly iconography and or specific art forms are created and evolved as a result of religion's influence. For example, Buddhist or Hindu sculpture, Jewish music, Christian painting, Islamic calligraphy, poetry or tile work, Sufi dance, and so forth. Art can also lead to our encounter with the sacred, often sharing with religion an interest in the transcendent, and art theory can intersect with ideas of the spiritual, even when an emphasis on materialism in society prevails. One of the reasons I think that art and religion have a persisting interaction is that the creative process and the mystical experience both require trans-rational states of being. Scholars, psychologists, artists, and religionists alike have historically had a challenge when describing the creative process or the experience of worship, communion with the divine. We can approach art and religion from a purely theoretical or comparative perspective through such fields as art history, art criticism, the study of the humanities, theology, comparative religion, and the like. We can analyze the literary aspects of scripture, the relationship between religious history and architecture, the use of the arts in the context of a particular religion. We can write on faith, on artistic symbolism, on a religious philosophy of art. The study of each of these disciplines does not require us to experience directly either the creative process, i.e. to make something, or to experience anything of a divine or transcendent nature, even though we might know a great deal about religion and be able to describe a worship service and so forth. But our study can be enhanced through the experience of doing or even being, as the mystical state might suggest or entail. Along with accepting the value of experiencing the creative process and or the mystical reality, I think we must also respect the products of art as entities that cannot easily be reduced to definition or explanation. Tolstoy once observed that the most important thing in a work of art is that it should have a kind of focus, i.e. that there should be some place where all the rays meet or from which they issue. And this focus must not be able to be completely explained in words. This indeed is one of the significant facts about a true work of art, that its content in its entirety can be expressed only by itself. Nor should we expect from art the kind of direct didactic truth that we may get from science, history, or even religion. The very nature of truth is relative to the context in which it is voiced, and certainly art and religion at times offer different truths, or perhaps simply approach truth differently. With art having decidedly a greater interest and tolerance for ambiguity and relativity. Religion and art have historically had many conflicts. From one point of view, aesthetic tastes are a matter of indifference to religion. Frank Birch Brown points out that the New Testament Beatitudes, for example, do not mention those with good taste among the blessed. On the contrary, the poor and the outcast, who might be the least likely to have good taste, are the ones for whom the kingdom is said to be the most accessible. Unfortunately for those of us who have creative drive and or talent, there is no verse that says, "Blessed are the art makers." There is one Bible verse, however, that I often think about with regard to art. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And when people question the need for art, I sometimes share with them the following poem by Michael Fitzgerald. What use art? A stretcher to wheel in the wounded, a monument of blossoms, a bit of lattice work on the temple, each painting a record of a psychic diver, each poem an artifact, life to be lived as a symphony, or maybe just some chamber music for the few, each breath a brushstroke, each day a dance. Certainly art excels at showing us rather than telling us about aspects of life and the human experience. But creativity, though considered by many a virtue, is not always valued in society or by religion, and certainly the creative process is difficult to define and understand. In creating order out of chaos, the artist may be challenged more than others in seeking moderation in general, or in the spiritual path in particular, wherein calmness, detachment, the cultivation of virtue, and following the rules is often sought and or expected. In some senses, art is order which carries with it the threat of chaos, and the personalities of artists are sometimes seen as a test within a more normative religious community. The order religion is concerned with is social order, which is maintained through specific teachings, restrictions, administrative, and or clerical practice. Most faiths place emphasis on unity, group work, the tempering of the individual in light of the needs of the community. Art can seldom, if ever, be effectively produced by committee, and the order it seeks is a different kind than that engendered by religious community, despite the many historical instances in which art is the handmaid of religion. embellishing it, helping to spread it, teaching its values and virtues, and so forth. Artists are often faced with being misunderstood or underappreciated by their religious community. For example, one might expect to pay a plumber or accountant or computer consultant who fixes a problem at the church, but to pay a liturgical dancer or a writer of church plays or a person who embellishes the sanctuary, we often expect those with creative gifts, even highly advanced or technical ones, to give of their talents freely, and sometimes think of their work as superfluous, an extra. Of course, we might remember that at one time the church was the greatest patron of the arts. In the Baha'i scriptural text, there are admonitions to respect the possessors of talent and treat craftsmen with deference. Yet artists must be committed to the cultivation of his or her art without the reassurance that there will be others who will understand, a feat that requires discipline, sacrifice, and a measure of solitude. And sometimes one doesn't find one's audience until one is passed on. In particular, it's been hard for women to achieve success as artists, as society has not sanctioned the kind of dedication or individualism it takes for a woman to achieve in an art form. Yet the Baha'i writings say she must become proficient in the arts and sciences and prove by her accomplishments that her abilities and powers have merely been latent. And here's another prophecy. Rest ye assured, ere long the day shall come when the men addressing the women shall say, Blessed are ye, blessed are ye. Verily you are worthy of every gift. Verily ye deserve to adorn your heads with the crown of everlasting glory. Because in sciences and arts, in virtues and perfections, ye shall become equal to man. And as regards tenderness of heart and the abundance of mercy and sympathy, ye are superior. So to share a personal story, years ago I was performing at the New York City Baha'i Center with two other women artists, and one of the quotations we read at the beginning was that one. At the end of the evening, we asked the audience if there were any questions, and a male voice boomed from the back of the auditorium, calling out, Blessed are ye, blessed are ye. He was not a member of the Baha'i faith, making his affirmation even more significant to us. For religion, the most important thing about a work is its efficacy in promoting the aims and teachings of the religion or evoking a personal transformation. Before a work is tried out, there's no way to determine its efficacy. So even within a religious context, some experimentation is necessary to evolve in the production of drama, film, music, and commemoration of holy days, feasts, and the like. So here I'm going to show you a series of images taken at various Rizwan pageants that we've done over the years so you can glimpse a little bit of our experimentation. Yet religious institutions may resist experimentation and need to have a more controlled environment, unlike the art community, which can thrive on experimentation and sometimes even controversy. There's a natural human instinct to embody and express ideas about the divine in tangible form, yet religious communities will have a natural human resistance to idolatry, viewed as a substitution of the created for the creator. The tension between these two, and among other factors, have resulted in restrictions and in conventions with regard to the use of art in portraying religious subjects. Along with the fear of worshiping images, there can be unease about art that focuses on worldliness, on the physical body, and on uncontrollable forces brought to the surface by art. Fear of artistic expressions that do not coincide with religious laws and morality. Negative thinking about what others have done or do. If an artist's talents are actualized, it's common for others to experience jealousy. Matters of power and rebellion. Artists have been known to defy the dictates of leaders or patrons. Discomfort about charismatic or Dionysian trends in art, and so forth. Certainly, as Plato says, art can make us choose against reason. So I'll just let these slides play out. This was from our largest Rizwan pageant, which was at SMU with an audience of 700. This one is in our backyard. And you can see the various participants, some of whom have grown up in our Rizwan pageants. There's the boat. You know, we've used various symbols from the story of Rizwan to tell the story. in a more artful way. This one is the Dallas Nature Center. And the week before, when we were looking at the place, there were worms. Oh, there's my dog trying on turban ideas. The horse that year was the main attraction, and his costume was the biggest budget item. But the week before, there were worms hanging from the trees, and there was a sign saying, "Beware of snakes." And the lovely Persian woman who was going to do our reception said, "Ann, why are we doing this outdoors?" And I said, "Nadia, it's because of the horse. The horse we need to use this year." So we did have a lovely program, and the sign was covered, and there were no snakes or worms, defecting our program. This is at a Baha'i center. And this shows a depiction of a rose, which I had made to be a sort of stained glass window with light coming through it. However, it was interesting to hear some responses to this, because some people were worried that people coming in would think that we worship the rose. And of course, for me, artistically, it was a symbol of the prophet of God and of beauty, and not of ritual or something that would take away from the program. So I think when we do experiment, we can anticipate diversity in responses to such things. On the other side of prohibition, or fears about certain aspects of art, is the conformity sometimes demanded by society or institutions. A clear example occurs during the European Middle Ages, when the church was almost the sole patron of the arts for several centuries. Art was to have a religious function alone. In 787 AD, the Second Council of Nicaea set forth rules for artistic representation that were binding upon artists for almost 500 years. For example, the substance of religious scenes is not left to the initiative of the artists. It derives from the principles laid down by the Catholic Church and religious tradition. His art, i.e. his craft, alone belongs to the painter. Its organization and arrangement belong to the clergy. Strict conventions for sacred subjects evolved. Jesus on the cross had to be shown with his mother on the right and St. John on the left. Only God, Jesus, the angels, and the apostles could be shown with bare feet. St. Peter was given a short beard, and St. Paul was always bald and had a long beard. Whenever possible, the number 3, representing the Trinity, was in evidence, particularly in triple arches in architecture and triple meter in music. There were other conventions that seemed, from our vantage point, to inhibit or at least limit artistic creativity. We might conclude that the dynamic created by both conventionality and by restriction has a great impact on art, and on religious art in particular. In the Baha'i faith, it's interesting that there is a restriction regarding the depiction of the manifestation. In fact, the Universal House of Justice talks about the great and wonderful works of art of past dispensations, many of which portrayed the manifestations of God in a spirit of reverence and love. But, they say, there is an impossibility of representing in any human form, whether pictorially, in sculpture, or in dramatic representation, the person of God's manifestation. And this also extends to Abdu'l-Baha as well. As we found, my husband and I, when we were working on Luminous Journey, not only, of course, we knew we could not portray him dramatically, but also we had to be very careful with the images we used of him and how they were represented. Religion, however, is not the only factor in the restriction of art. Any authoritarian regime, for example, may turn against forms of art in order to assert its power. And even in democracies, a conservative element may resist free expression. In ancient Greece, there was anti-art sentiment in Platonism, in the philosophical critique of the artist. Lack of respect for other cultures have historically been the cause of destruction of arts and artifacts, not to mention people themselves. And of course, two of the most extreme examples are the destruction of art during China's Cultural Revolution and Hitler's denunciation of art that did not correspond to his concept of what art should be. The art he labeled as degenerate art related to his resistance to much of the fresh impulses of modernism. More than 5,000 works were seized, banned, and derided as being un-German, Jewish, or communist in nature, and artists were punished and restricted. Music was expected to be tonal and free of jazz influences. plays, and films were often censored. A totalitarian view of art with its attendant prohibitions is in direct contrast with the Baha'i model, characterized by tolerance, diversity, freedom from prejudice, and world-mindedness. As the Baha'i writings state, Baha'is are free to paint, write, and compose as their talents guide them. This does not mean that anything we produced, however, will be lauded or even accepted by the community, but it does ensure a climate of openness for the artist to pursue his or her work. Over time, excuse me, religion itself can show a progressively material preoccupation as art forms symbolizing the underlying meaning of life, such as the icon, mosaic, stained glass, and religious music, give way to banal pictorialism and simple repeated hymns, blunting artistic and spiritual sensitivity. Yet art cannot be easily divorced from meaningful and transcendental purposes, and in fact some art that has no claim to be spiritual sometimes evokes an epiphanous response. I think especially of works by Cirque du Soleil in this regard, and also some of the so-called New Age music or other art forms. Art does not have to become religious again or deal mainly with religious themes or traditional symbols and iconography to achieve transcendence or to evoke spirituality. But I predict the art of the future will become again more open to religion, to a new rootedness, a basic certainty and trust in life and in the future. Much of this will be through the Baha'i influence. In a book called On the Strange Place of Religion in Contemporary Art, James Elkins argues that religion and art no longer mix. There is almost no religious art in museums or books of art history, he says. Talk of art and religion have become alienated from one another, and it would be artificial to bring them together. He goes on to show that there's no place for religion in serious scholarship. Yet he gives examples of modern artists who are associated with spiritual perspective. Kandinsky, Marc Chagall, George Rouault, Paul Klee, Bernard Newman, Mark Rothko. Still, he says, working artists today who are concerned with themes of spirituality do not attract the attention of people who write for art magazines. The absence of religious talk is a practical issue because it robs such artists of the interpretive tools they need most. The most inventive and interesting art has separated itself from religious themes, he asserts, and the sense now is that religion need not be brought into the teaching of art. When religion does come up, it's usually because there's been a scandal. Someone has painted a Madonna using elephant dung, or put a statue of Jesus into a jar of urine. Very occasionally, an artwork will appear that presents itself as sincerely religious. But as he says, there is a tremendous amount of religious art outside of the art world, and that is the art that we are more likely to encounter in our churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples. Elkins says that most religious art is bad art, out of touch with the history of modernism. Here we might take issue, as there are many forms of art with various purposes and audiences, and the House of Justice encourages the use and development of folk art as well as other forms of art. Some art utilized by religion may not be embraced by the art world, but may still impact people and even achieve longevity. Popular taste now seems to be increasingly fascinated with spiritual ideas, such as the idea of near-death experience, for instance. But take something like the continued popularity of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. Whoops, I have the slide out of order, but at any rate, well, there it is. No matter where someone stands with regard to historical fiction or the accuracy of his ideas, one has to admit it's great reading, much better than the theological pieces written to denounce or question it. Let's see if I can go backwards. Yes. Okay, a greater taste for inclusion and cultural diversity is evident. In 1999, Sister Wendy Beckett judged an international competition called Jesus 2000 in order to find the best images of Jesus for the millennium. There were over 1,000 entries. Her pick was Janet McKenzie's Jesus of the People, a painting of Christ as a black man with 3 symbols in the background, a halo, a yin-yang, and a feather. And here I need to add more current examples, but I think more and more people are discovering books and films that reflect a wider perspective and reach. For example, Jon Stewart's film Rosewater Oops, now I have to go through that. Is an example that's particularly meaningful to Baha'is, as it is journalist Maziar Bahari's own story of unjust imprisonment in Iran. And of course, Bahari is the filmmaker of To Light of Candle, currently being shown in many places in this country, maybe around the world. So now it may interest you to see some of the titles of books I've used in my own research. Toward a Theology of Beauty, A Holy Tradition of Working, Kandinsky's Concerning the Spiritual of Art, in Art, certainly a quintessential text for understanding spirit in art. Symbolism, the Sacred and the Arts, Mircea Eliade. Art, Creativity, and the Sacred, A Painter's Quest, Art as a Way of Revelation. The Spiritual in Art, Abstract Painting. This is a catalog of an exhibit that was held in the 80s. A Theology of Artistic Sensibilities, the Visual Arts in the Church. Of Fiction and Faith, 12 American writers talk about their vision and work. Has Modernism Failed? Susie Gablik, and the Reenchantment of Art. And of course, we Baha'is know that often many people are picking up on these ideas of spirituality now, infused through the Baha'i revelation, but perhaps not aware of it. Art is a way of knowing, a guide to self-knowledge and spiritual fulfillment through creativity. Negotiating Rapture. Don't you love that title? And certainly Baha'i Sources, Drawings, Verse, and Belief by Bernard Leach, books by or about Mark Tobey, and other books that bring together essays, and certainly Ludwig Thumann's book, Mirror of the Divine. Artists may reflect prevalent moods more than others. While some people feel only vaguely and superficially, many artists go through conscientiously, intensively, and painfully, which is why a climate of encouragement is so important for the cultivation of creativity. So I've talked about how religion might influence art, but what about how art might inspire a religious experience or quest? Poet Denise Levertov talks about art that enfeathes, and her intellectual and aesthetic creed encompasses the idea that the artist has an obligation to adhere to vision, to the inspired experience, and to nurture creative gifts. Surprised by the positive response of her readers to her poems reflecting the spiritual quest, Levertov comments on the amount of unadvertised religious commitment among people who like poetry. So she's led her audiences in on the process of building her own belief structure through her art. She describes the poems that emerge as written on the road to an imagined destination of faith, which acts as yeast in her life as a writer. She says, in that sense, I do experience faith that works as well as work that enfeathes. So now I'd like to share with you a few of her poems to show how she grapples with the spiritual quest. And this one is a reversal of Wordsworth's "The world is too much with us," and yet it arrives at the same theme of the need to awaken to life's offerings. Oh, taste and see. The world is not with us enough. Oh, taste and see, the subway Bible poster said, meaning the Lord, meaning, if anything, all that lives to the imagination's tongue, grief, mercy, language, tangerine, weather, to breathe them, bite, savor, chew, swallow, transform, into our flesh, our deaths, crossing the street, plumb, quince, living in the orchard and being hungry and plucking the fruit. Jacob's Ladder. The stairway is not a thing of gleaming strands, a radiant evanescence for angels' feet that only glance in their tread and need not touch the stone. It is of stone, a rosy stone that takes a glowing tone of softness, only because behind it the sky is a doubting night gray. A stairway of sharp angles, solidly built. One sees that the angels must spring down from one step to the next, giving a little lift of the wings, and a man climbing must scrape his knees and bring the grip of his hands into play. The cut stone consoles his groping feet. Wings brush past him. The poem ascends. One more. Claritas. The all-day bird, the artist, white-throated sparrow, striving in hope and good faith to make his notes ever more precise, closer to what he knows. There is the proposition and the development, the way one grows from the other. The all-day bird ponders. May the first note be round enough, and those that follow fine, fine as sweetgrass, praise the all-day bird. Fine as the tail of a lizard, as a leaf of chives, the shadow of a difference falling between note and note, a hair's breadth defining them. The dew is on the vine leaves. My tree is lit with the break of day. Sun, light, 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 light. There are, of course, many other artists who reflect spirituality in their work, whether or not they are specifically religious. Mark Rothko may be the only modern artist who has a chapel built to house his art, with meditation benches facing the paintings, but others are not ashamed to let their art reflect religious concerns. Flannery O'Connor related her Catholicism to her role as a fiction author, weaving concepts of grace in with her notions of the grotesque, and how it pushes us to confront ideas that might evoke the spiritual. And there are other modern artists, certainly, that embrace the spiritual. There are also artists who have embraced the Baha'i faith, and artists who have been inspired to pursue art in order to express their faith. Mark Tobey, achieving acclaim in the art world, wove some images of the faith into his more abstract work. And here you can see various figures reflecting Eastern ideas and personages, and certainly reflecting his interest in the Baha'i faith. I was lucky enough to meet Mark Tobey in his home in Switzerland, one of the most interesting days of my life. Robert Hayden was a superb craftsman of poetry. Sometimes Baha'is would be frustrated with him because he felt he did not have time to serve on committees and so forth, as he was engaged with what he felt was the best way to serve the faith, through becoming an excellent poet. He is known and anthologized around the world, and we can be very proud of him. Here is one of his more overtly religious poems based on Suleiman Khan, a Baha'i martyr. Ablaze with candles, sconced in weeping eyes of wounds, he danced through jeering streets to death. O sang against the drumming mockery God's praise, flames nested in his flesh, fed the fires that consume us now, the fire that will save. Other Baha'i artists, and I don't have time to speak about them, but include painters Marion Jack, Reginald Turvey, and Juliet Thompson, poets Roger White, Larry Rowden, and Michael Fitzgerald, potter Bernard Leach, jazz singer Tierney Sutton, violinist Farzad, visual artist Robin Rearson, Jane Blanche Milligan, Bill Skuse, who just died recently, Jalal Quinn, Paula Henderson, Sasha Rogers, Otto Donald Rogers, and many others in the last few decades, including Larry Travis, photographer. Two people deserve special mention, I think. Dr. David Rue, who was an artist himself, as well as a medical doctor and certainly a servant of the Baha'i faith, and who inspired many of us to pursue our arts and media. And Anne Gould Halberg, who is about 97 now, I believe, still living in Seattle, a Baha'i who launched Dale Chihuly and the Pilchuck Glass School. Very much a supporter of the arts. Now, to bring this sort of to an end, I want to quote a few things from the writings and then open it to questions if there's time. In accordance with the divine teachings, the acquisition of sciences and the perfection of arts is considered as acts of worship. If a man engages with all his power in the acquisition of a science or in the perfection of an art, It is as if he has been worshiping God in the churches and the temples. What bounty greater than this, that science should be considered as an act of worship and art as service to the kingdom of God. I rejoice to hear that thou takest pains with thine art, for in this wonderful new age art is worship. The more thou strivest to perfect it, the closer wilt thou come to God. What bestower could be greater than this, that one's art should be even as the act of worshiping the Lord? That is to say, when thy fingers grasp the paintbrush, it is as if thou wert at prayer in the temple. There will be a new art, a new architecture, fused of all the beauty of the past, but new. The stage will be the pulpit of the future. The drama is of utmost importance. It has been a great educational power in the past. It will be so again. It behooveth the craftsmen of the world to exert their highest endeavor and diligently pursue their professions, so that their efforts may produce that which will manifest the greatest beauty and perfection before the eyes of all men. Set to music the verses and the divine words, so that they may be sung with soul-stirring melody in the assemblies and gatherings, and that the hearts of the listeners may rise toward the kingdom in supplication and prayer. Encourage the children from their earliest years to master every kind of learning and make them eager to become skilled in every art. That day will come when the cause will spread like wildfire, when its spirit and teachings will be presented on the stage or in art and literature as a whole. Art can better awaken such noble sentiments than cold rationalizing, especially among the mass of the people. We have to wait only a few years to see how the spirit breathed by Baha'u'llah will find expression in the work of the artists. Now, other visionaries have speculated on what the future will be like in terms of the arts. Isadora Duncan, for example, predicted that music, art, architecture, and drama would come together. And she said, "Our theaters will become temples. All drama should have its foundation in religion, for without that it becomes ignoble. The dance of the future will have to become again a high religious art, as it was with the Greeks. For art which is not religious is not art, is mere merchandise. The dance will return as I have envisioned it. Mankind will not always expect those with vision to put a seed in the ground and bring it to flowering in a single night." And Brian Swimmy, a cosmologist and physicist, has another view of the future. That day will come when the political and commercial leaders of all nations sing together. Board members of multinational corporations will dance before every major decision. Nor will this seem strange, but rather the sanest activity, the most valuable for wisdom. Music will not be understood as entertainment, but as the fullness of life. Dance will not be seen as a side activity, but as the very discipline that leads to truth. To be human is to enter this dance and celebrate this mystery of existence. There is no more political act. To make music is to join with that power that created galaxies. Who can know this and refuse to dance? The Baha'i poet Roger White, contrasting the role of the artist in current-day society and in a future world order, commented, and this is called Bring Chocolate. I may shorten it a little because of time, so let's skip the wonderful first sentence, the first paragraph. "I am of the conviction that in the future, increasingly, one important measure of the spiritual maturity and health of the Baha'i world community will be its capacity to attract and win the allegiance of artists of all kinds, and its sensitivity and imaginativeness in making creative use of them. Artists, not tricksters and conjurers, but committed artists, will be a vital force in preventing inflexibility in our community. They will be a source of rejuvenation. They will serve as a bulwark against fundamentalism, stagnation, and administrative sterility. Artists call us away from formulas, caution us against the fake, and accustom us to unpredictability, that trait which so characterizes life. They validate our senses. They link us to our own history. They clothe and give expression to our dreams and aspirations. They teach us impatience with stasis. They aid us to befriend our private experiences and heed our unexamined mechanistic responses to the world. They sabotage our smugness. They alert us to divine intimations. Art conveys information about ourselves and our universe that can be found nowhere else. Our artists are our benefactors. To the degree the Baha'i community views its artists as a gift rather than a problem, will it witness the spread of the faith like wildfire, as promised by Shoghi Effendi, through their talents being harnessed to the dissemination of the spirit of the cause. In general society, artists are often at war with their world and live on its fringes. Their lack of discretion in expressing their criticism, which may be hostile, vituperative, negative, and offer no solutions, may lead to their rejection and dismissal by the very society they long to influence. Artists are frequently seen as troublemakers, menaces, destroyers of order, or as frivolous clowns. Sometimes the kindest thing said of them is that they are neurotic or mad. In the Baha'i community, it must be different. Baha'u'llah said so. Consider that the Baha'i writings state that all art is a gift of the Holy Spirit and exhort us to respect those engaged in science, crafts, and arts. The artist has, among other responsibilities, those of questioning our values, of leading us to new insights that release our potential for growth, of illuminating our humanity, of renewing our authenticity by putting us in touch with our inner selves, and of creating works of art that challenge us, as Roca says, to change our lives. The artist aids in our transformation. In the Baha'i Order, the artists will find their home at the center of their community, free to interact constructively with the people who are served by their art, free to give and to receive strength and inspiration. It is my hope that all of us who are gathered here will be in the vanguard of this reconciliation between artists and their world. As Baha'u'llah foretells, the artists are coming home to claim their place. I urge you, be there, welcome them, bring chocolate. Thank you, Roger. Back to a couple more quotations. Although now is only the beginning of Baha'i art, yet the friends who feel they are gifted in such matters should endeavor to develop and cultivate their gifts, and through their works to reflect, however inadequately, the divine spirit which Baha'u'llah has breathed into the world. And certainly that phrase, however inadequately, is a great consolation as we work. Religion, when embraced, needs to be integrated into life, and artists need to internalize the themes and metaphors that reflect concern for spiritual transformation, world-embracing ideals and realities, new technologies, and so forth. This is an organic process, one which cannot be forced. The artist in general speaks a new language, incorporating original material into creative work. Art turns our minds around, helping us to think differently. We need adventuresome artists, willing to risk making new statements. Art should just not reassure us of the past. We need administrators and practical community members who will not be afraid to encourage artists so that the arts can flourish and in turn enrich the community. There is and will be a place for didactic art that gives us lessons in morals or religious history, particularly in terms of child education, or that helps us commemorate specific events. But generally, a larger kind of art will also need to be present to help us embrace an aesthetic way of knowing. This art will be more effective and longer lasting. We need to avoid the pitfalls of adopting a state art, a bureaucratic art, or art that simply reflects the ideological stance of religion instead of reflecting the authentic experience and vision of a human being. True art will take us on unexpected journeys, will sharpen our senses, engender epiphanies, and direct us to new decisions. And it can also enhance our experience of worship and of meaning within a new paradigm. Art and religion, both potent forces in civilization, can be seen as having a profound, eternal partnership, capable of things beyond our current imaginings. The future propels us into arenas that are profoundly new and distinctive. Art will help us embrace and make sense of them, especially when interwoven with religion. Thank you. And now, perhaps there's time for questions.
Thank you so much, Fran. This was really an amazing, not only an intellectual experience, but the program itself was an aesthetic experience as well. So you demonstrated your points with your slides and your own appearance and everything, I think, quite well. It was quite a, what can I say, an incredible experience to sort of do the entire history of the relationship between art and religion in a little over 45 minutes, with a large section of it right on the role of the Baha'is. So it was really, really fantastic, and I'm very appreciative of your overview and the insights that you had about it. I'm curious what you think the Baha'i community itself could do right now to strengthen the arts, if you have any specific suggestions and ideas while we're waiting for other questions.
Well, there's so many ways, Rob, and certainly, we're trying to incorporate arts in our various core activities and other aspects of Baha'i life, but certainly just simply encouragement, asking for creative ideas, welcoming experimentation at feast and so forth. I can remember one time I was working with a group of people to put on a beautiful feast, and we were actually rehearsing it the night before, and I said, let's try moving, we had some little choreography as part of the feast, and everyone was resistant to it. And they said, no, that'll never work. People think it's really hokey. And I said, well, in theater, we try things. I don't know if it'll work or not, but let's just try it. We did. It worked beautifully, and people were very inspired by that aspect of the feast. But of course, it shouldn't become ritualistic. So there's many things, both in small ways and in larger ways, what we study, embracing the notion that many people, it will take years to develop their talents in certain art fields that we need, filmmakers, we need animation artists, we need graphic designers, we need all kinds of people that can do a great job at reflecting the spirit of this faith. And so none of it is wasted, but I think sometimes the artist does feel alone, perhaps troubled. Sometimes we need intermediaries that can help support. For example, Tim and I offered to take our Rizwan pageant to some wonderful Baha'i centers with large stages, but the problem was they didn't have the budget for the airfare to bring us out. And so perhaps there are people who might be open to the arts and have some wealth that would contribute towards such things so that the artist can be paired with communities that can be served by their arts, if that makes sense.
Good. I think it's quite an exciting vision that Baha'i communities could encourage the arts this way and have artists come and visit. I know a few years ago, was it Christopher Rue or it was Doug Rue came through our area with a traveling jazz band and spoke at our local Baha'i Center and performed to an audience which was packing our Baha'i Center, which is about 60 people. That's all we can hold. And these kinds of events really are very uplifting and a marvelous way to provide a service to the greater community and to inspire the Baha'is to do more with art by themselves locally as well. Do you have any ideas or suggestions what the Wilmette Institute could do to further encourage the arts?
Well, certainly the course on the arts is a great thing. I think we've done it twice before, or is it 3 times? And it's coming up again. And it's been a very rich place of discourse and also a way that artists in various localities can connect to others that share the same ideas. And so it's been a healing thing and also a scholarly and artistically generative kind of experience. So I think you're on the right path with that, and even sponsoring this talk is an example of your openness to include rather than exclude the arts and that experiential aspect as well as scholarship.
And we're going to have, in addition to you, we're also going to have Sandra Hutchison as one of our speakers. I think she speaks in May or June. She is also involved in the arts course that starts in 10 days. And she and Marjan Niru together run an arts workshop in the fall where Baha'is who are interested either on the one hand in the visual arts like painting and such, or involved in poetry, are able to get expert mentoring from the two of them. So we have these two courses, and I'm sure there will be more courses that we can create in the future. We have a person who's involved in music who has agreed to help us out with courses which would involve music, and possibly in the arts workshop this fall we'll be able to help people interested in improving their music through this other person who has volunteered to serve as faculty. I don't see any other questions right offhand, and I'm not sure if I have anything else. Do you have any other last words, Anne? Any other comments?
I think you're maybe looking in the chat, Rob. Maybe you want to look in questions instead. I see a whole bunch.
Oh, under questions. I didn't even know about questions. I'm glad you told me, Boyd.
First question while he's looking, and a lot of people are asking for download links for your presentation and some of your references to the books that you studied. Can you make those available to Rob maybe to disseminate?
I can. Let's see, what would be the easiest way, Rob? Certainly, I don't know. Rob, do you have an idea?
Yeah, well, if we can certainly put things up on our website if people want to look at things. We will have the talk. This particular PowerPoint, of course, is 85 megs, and it'll be a little difficult to make that available to people, but certainly we can make other things available through our website.
Perhaps I could simplify it and just have the quotes and the list of books, you know, as a simpler PowerPoint or something like that, and then, you know, that could be available.
Yep, that's good.
We can also convert it to PDF, and sometimes that shrinks the thing down quite a bit, so that's another possibility.
Okay.
And some people looking for a link to view, again, Anne's talk. It'll be in the Wilmette Institute YouTube channel when we're all done, probably within the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get the questions more than one line long, which means I can barely see them. I can't figure out how to make it bigger.
Okay,
So
well,
maybe, Boyd, if you could read another one or two while I'm
Sure.
trying to figure out how to do that.
Where is the role of censorship in all of this? And, you know, some people asking the questions about where does an artist interact with their local assembly or the agencies that kind of govern and have that sort of overlooking eye to what's appropriate and what's not?
It's an excellent question, and we're all affected by this really because there's a marvelous review system. However, sometimes artists may feel discouraged about various things, but it's because right now the faith is so little known in the world, and there's a real emphasis on protecting it and on presenting it in the best way possible. And so I know when we were working on our film and we wanted to try out various things, and sometimes review would question it, and then we'd have to, in one case we took it to the National Spiritual Assembly, and the National Spiritual Assembly agreed with review, and we had to take something out of our film. And that was hard as artists because we were very attached to that particular thing. And yet there's a safeguard there. And then on other occasions, review became more open to what we presented. I know in one case we had a photo of Abdu'l-Baha sort of moving forward, almost as if he's walking down a sidewalk. And the comment was it looked a little hokey, and we said, no, we think it's artistic, and they allowed it to stay. So it's a conversation, really. It's a dialogue, just as if you wrote a book and had an editor work with you on sharpening it and making it better. You know, the writer often has things to learn from that process. And so review is actually very important and can help us all learn things and grow as we navigate this new terrain. And certainly we all want to be respectful of what the institutions may desire. And yet we as artists will challenge those very institutions at times.
I'm gradually figuring out how to make this look better. I see you got this question, as you mentioned, about censorship. There's another very interesting one here. Please comment on the notion that we should avoid images in reaction to our art. Is this only referring to the images of manifestations?
Well, I don't think so, and it may depend on cultural sensitivity. You know, in some situations, for example, a nude form might be perfectly acceptable, and in other situations not. And that would be true with costumery and other things as well. So we have to be aware that you know, humans will have various values in various cultures, and certainly the Baha'i faith has a high standard of moderation and chastity and so forth. And so it's a balancing act. I don't think we can make strict rules about these things, except, and here's an interesting example. When we were working on the film and we wanted to show architecture that had, say, stained glass windows with Jesus, Review wanted us to be very careful about including images, even from past religions. But of course, we were doing it from an architectural perspective, not necessarily related to the content of the image. So again, it's a dialogue. It's a process of trying things and seeing what works and what might not work.
There's a question here also, was the last section you read about the purposes of art serve something you wrote yourself, or was that a quote from some other place? Part of it says something about the embrace an aesthetic way of knowing. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, this is my conclusion, and I believe it's my own words, and of course that is a phrase sometimes we hear, an aesthetic way of knowing, but I don't have any sources there. I believe that's all my own thought. And that is a paragraph I wrote some years ago, so I'd have to go back.
Here's another interesting question. I've read the expression, I think from Shoghi Effendi, about avoiding the prostitution of art. What does this mean? How do I know if I am doing it or not, since my artwork sometimes doesn't have boundaries because it is an inner expression? So then again, what does it mean? Should we have a boundary at all? A boundary after all?
Well, I think that relates to the process of review, and I think that on a local level you could certainly confer with the spiritual assembly, and then, you know, if it's going to be something that does get published or screened or whatever outside of the local jurisdiction, then certainly it needs to go through review. So I think that system for Baha'is is in place. It's interesting, though, to note that people who aren't Baha'is aren't bound by that. For example, in the film The Gardener, the filmmaker was able to use all the footage of Abdu'l-Baha that was shot, and of course we had to ask permission through the House of Justice that then referred it to the National Assembly, and we, you know, were waiting on pins and needles to see if we could use 6 seconds of that. And so it's a different relationship for a Baha'i, and I guess we just have to be disciplined about it and obedient sometimes, and it's not always easy.
Here's another very interesting question. I think, have you done any work making direct links between the principles of art and the attributes of God, such as the attribute of justice and the element of art balance?
Well, that's a wonderful thought, and certainly the attribute of beauty is the one that I've most focused on in my some decades, you know. That's a wonderful thing, and I inspire everyone to try that. And certainly we can, with this new calendar understanding, unfolding, and the emphasis on learning about the days of the week, the days of the month, the Vahids, and so forth, we can all think about the attributes of God in our work. And for example, our artwork may be informed by a particular idea, for example, the unity of humankind. A lot of emerging Baha'i artwork, I think, does partake of this attribute, the importance of embracing, including, accepting. And so I think all of us can do that work, and that's a certainly wonderful thought.
And we have another question here. Are there any online Baha'i forums for artists to connect and see what each other are doing?
There's a number of them, and one is going to be emerging through the Association for Baha'i Studies. I hope there's a website in development right now that has resources for artists and communities, and it will also, I hope, be a place where people can put their own information in. There have been a number of things like Wings to the Spirit, a group in Florida that has a great website. You can look that up online. The European-based Baha'i Faith and the Arts, BAFA, anyway, they have a website, and so there's lots of things that people may not be aware of. I was just at Desert Rose at their Symposium for Arts and Scholarship, and that was a wonderful experience. Just keep abreast of it and look for this new website through ABS, through the Arts Special Interest Group. And then we hope to make Orison, the Arts Journal, an online publication. So those things are in the works. Maybe we can announce them through the Wilmette Institute.
Oh, that'd be marvelous. We have a few more questions. I'm impressed we have so many. I'm sorry that I didn't notice the question box here. How can we expand our definition of the arts to go beyond music, painting, and stage? So many people are intimidated and put off by this limit. Can we not expand our definition to include things like cooking and sewing and other crafts that inspire our personal environments?
Well, it's interesting because I teach at an art school, and we have culinary arts, we have fashion design, we have graphic design, and so forth. So I'm steeped in all these things, but I think certainly we could look at anything, any service that we render, especially with the goal of achieving excellence as an art form. Certainly cooking, certainly any aspect of life, really. And we know that architecture has such a profound impact upon us when we enter buildings or even the outdoors. So yes, I think all of us can work on thinking about nature and all of the aspects of cultivated life as artful and as worthy of our attention.
Have you any suggestions or ideas for how quilt making can be used in service of the Baha'i Faith?
Well, I think it has been, and there are a number of quilts on display, for example, at Greenacre and at the House of Worship and so forth. So I was just at Desert Rose where a quilt maker from California presented her quilt making experiences with children, and in fact she had even gone to Japan. She's an African-American woman who had gone to Japan and worked with children there, and so she was showing how through the quilts of slaves, for example, stories could be told, and her work was profound to me. So certainly this is an avenue that one could work toward telling stories involving community, participation where various people contributed to a quilt, perhaps on the theme of peace or race unity or whatever. So I think certainly all of these things could be more utilized within the Baha'i community and within other communities.
And here's another interesting question. Inspiration must relate to the spirit. We know that the spiritual world is all good. Is work that denigrates the spiritual beliefs of a group considered art?
I have some general thoughts on that, and perhaps sometimes we avoid certain art because it deals with troubling issues, or I think sometimes we have to go through these things to get to the point of transcendence. I think of film especially with this, and in today's world we have to put up with a lot of language that is sort of denigrated and other things, but often the journey is worth it if we can get to the other side and not be afraid to take it. It's part of the human journey. On the other hand, we know the Guardian warned us against certain things that might, denigrate us. So I'm not sure I really answered the question, but I do think it's a tough one in the world in which we live.
We have one last. There's a whole bunch of things that aren't questions as much as thank you so much, Anne. And you might, if you get the chance, look at the question box, because there's like 4 or 5 people thanking you profusely for this particular presentation. This is a sort of exemplary one. Anne, thank you so much for your thorough coverage of the subject. Among so many things that you do is the promotion. Is there a way that the National Spiritual Assembly or other institutions would encourage creativity in this field by giving prizes or competitive scholarships? And I think that's a very interesting and exciting idea myself. I don't know, you have any comments about that?
Well, it would be wonderful. And I know there have been things like artist and residency programs at Baha'i schools and so forth. So I think many things could be done with imagination and trust that something will emerge. The artists will prove to be helpful to the Baha'i community and not just a hindrance. And so I think there's a hunger out there to see more and more of this. And I would certainly encourage all directions of it.
I just wanted to give people a quick summary of things that are coming up, just so that you're aware of them. As of today, we're starting a course on climate change. We have still about 15 slots, so there's still plenty of room for more people to join that course. This is a course we were encouraged to create by the National Spiritual Assembly's Office of External Affairs, which is now the Office of Public Affairs, and this is in conformity with the policies of the National Assembly and the Baha'i international community to raise awareness about the dangers of human-induced climate change. Of course, Anne and 2 other people, Sandra Hutchison and Marjan Miru, will be giving a course called The Baha'i Faith and the Arts starting on the 10th of March through the end of April. It's our typical 7-week course. If you're interested in registering, the best thing to do is to go to http://wilmetteinstitute.org. You will find a menu there where it says courses. Underneath that, actually, I think there's a button called Arts, and you can click on the Arts button, and that will give you links directly to information about the courses, which also includes the registration link. You might want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is the very complicated web address for it, but I think it's also just Wilmette Institute. I've seen it written that way as well, but I'm sure you can find our YouTube channel through Googling. We'll have Anne's talk up there in a few hours, perhaps sometime tomorrow. We have a toll-free number, 877-WILMETTE, if you need to call us for anything. And our next web talk is Sunday, April 12th, so it's about 6 weeks from now. Mujan Momen will be speaking about the recreation and utilization of a community's memories, Shoghi Effendi, and Baha'i history. So he'll be talking about how Shoghi Effendi, in particular, translated the Dawnbreakers in order to inspire the American Baha'is to arise and serve the faith. And so he looks very closely at the relationship between history and inspiration. Certainly today we had a good example of inspiration in Anne's presentation. I want to thank her again very much for this marvelous hour and a quarter that we've spent together talking about spirit and art as it relates to the Baha'i faith. And I want to thank all of you for having participated as well, and we look forward to seeing you again in another 6 weeks or so, unless we see you, of course, online in one of our courses. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today.
Thank you, Rob. It's been wonderful.